Hi, I'm Josh Curving, and welcome to another Death Battle prediction video. But first, we have Green Lantern versus Ben 10. So, that was a very, very good episode, actually. Despite the fact that not a whole hell of a lot of people seem to think so. Yeah, we got some stuff to talk about for this one. Honestly, the episode itself was almost perfect. The fight was actually very entertaining. I thought it was quite good. The music was very subtle in a way, and I actually quite liked that. The only thing that I would change about the animation is that, and they actually addressed this on the Death Battle cast, which, if you haven't seen, I definitely recommend going and checking that out, just because of the fact that it actually does bring up several fairly major parts of the discussion there. And the writer for the episode, Swan, one of my buddies on Discord actually, he is the writer for the episode, and he defends his stances and provides just really good citation and everything. Just proof that realistically Green Lantern does indeed stomp. The only thing that I would change about the animation is that at the end they have Green Lantern go back in time and cut off the Omnitrix off of Ben's arm. While they do say why they went with this from several different perspectives, one, it being something that he is capable of doing, because one, the failsafe isn't perfect. It didn't defend Ben from, like, all the various multiversal Bens when they were getting schmutzed by a multiversal capable event, when they were all getting completely blinked out of reality, which is something on the level of power that Green Lantern is capable of. So it's not necessarily something that the failsafe would be able to work with. Secondly, the scissors, because of the fact that Green Lantern's constructs are stupidly fast, much faster than the Omnitrix's failsafe, considering they had basically a feat that was the exact same as the Mega Man.exe feat, times a factor of 10, because of the fact that DC's universe is bigger, and it was done in a much shorter time frame. Whereas .exe, I think the calculation was given, a minute or so as like a high end kind of for how long it would take, in comparison to Green Lantern's feat, which had his constructs scan the entirety of the DC universe, and it wasn't just scanning; it was going around and searching in a single heartbeat, and it basically found none of them. So. The constructs are stupidly fast, meaning, yes, his scissors would be absolutely capable of getting past Ben's failsafe. It would be able to cut off his arm without him being able to transform into something. That's kind of just how the stats are for this fight. In terms of why I think they should not have done this, one of the reasons why they said that they wanted to was because they had they've even acknowledged that they might have gotten a lot less backlash for that part if they had just gone with Green Lantern just blasting the shit out of Alien X, disintegrating him, universe gone, that kind of thing. I do think that's true, that they would have gotten a lot less hate for that ending if they had gone that route. But what they actually said was that they had preferred a more creative finisher, because they've already done 3 big blast finishers. It was Wario versus DDD, a lot of the Mega Man actually were just blasted away, and I think one more. Shazam versus Captain Marvel, right? So really, they decided that they would rather go with a more creative finisher with some more fun to it, which I can get behind, absolutely. One of the things that people seem to really pick at for some reason is that they assume that the exact things that happen in the animation are all 100% accurate to the research, which isn't necessarily true. There's a lot of times, for example, when a character is more than fast enough to end the fight the moment it starts. So therefore, you have the fight being inaccurate to the research by virtue of there being a fight at all. It's just something that they kind of need to do. They're trying to make the entertaining fight. And in terms of trying to go against the research, sometimes you do just need to do that. You want to show off the capabilities. You want to have abilities get used. It just makes sense. So, I think it's a great episode. But then we need to come to the elephant in the room regarding this episode, which is Kuro the artist. He has done several videos. First off, one of the big things is that he was known for having this video that basically says that Ben 10 can beat pretty much anyone, which is a completely idiotic claim, considering Alien X is only universal, and only multiversal by virtue of statements made by the character designer, and only from the artistic perspective, who, keep in mind, even things that he said that he wanted to do have not been approved in the past. Like, he wanted to name an alien something and they declined it. So his word isn't actually law in regards to what happens in this verse. So that's the whole thing with the destroy a multiverse in 6 thoughts thing. That's complete bull. So then you have a baseline universal character who he says can basically beat anybody because Alien X is omnipotent, and no, not at all. Absolutely not. Celestial Sapiens are strong, but there's statements, very clear statements, saying that if there was a multiversal event happening and the Celestial Sapiens did not know about it in advance and could not deliberate to solve it, they would die. They would get completely wiped out. There are open author statements in regards to this situation. So, we have someone who is clearly trying to overplay Alien X and Ben 10, who has openly said several times over the course of this episode happening that he doesn't actually know very much about the Versus stats for Green Lantern. When he was making his videos on the subject, he shied away from actually saying anything about Green Lantern's abilities or stats. He just said, go watch someone else's video to find that out, because there's so many Green Lantern videos about Versus on the internet, which is tantamount to basically saying he knows nothing. You can't actually debate someone if you don't acknowledge their side of the argument. So, honestly, I kind of blame Kuro for this, the toxic reaction to this death battle, where basically people are screaming and covering their ears like a bunch of children, and ignoring all of the facts that are actually being provided. On the Death Battle cast and the battle itself, you have people in the comments basically saying, well, Alien X could just think him away. And they addressed that several times over the course of the Q&A, and they also address it at the end of the Death Battle itself, in the rundown for it. So, I kind of blame him for how people are acting, because he doesn't actually acknowledge or know anything about Green Lantern, and he had the gall to say that he knows more about Green Lantern than anyone at Screw Attack does about Ben 10. That's kind of a rude statement. He has no idea whether that is the case or not. This is running on quite a bit of time here, but this was a controversial one, so it does end up needing to be addressed a bit more. So personally, I don't think Kuro's videos hold any merit, because he never addresses the other side of the argument, and when the other side of the argument has multiversal feats, has speed far greater than anything Ben can react to, he's just not providing anything to this discussion except a very one-sided rundown on one of the side. So let's call it there for that one for now. I think I've made my case decently well for it. And then we go into the next fight, which is another controversial one. We had a controversial result, transition right into a controversial announcement. We have Weiss Schnee versus Mitsuru from Persona 3, if I recall. I'm not the biggest Persona person, but I have definitely looked into this one for the purposes of this match. Weiss is, of course, from Ruby, which is where the controversy comes from. Because last time we had a Ruby character, there was... It's ranked pretty highly on the controversial matches list. People kind of see Yang versus Tifa as basically being like a big ad for Ruby, and people think that that's what's going to happen again, and that Weiss is just going to be given the win. So I know several of the researchers. I talk to them fairly often, and I have been assured that both characters are being given 100% chance to win this fight. If a character wins, that's the result that they believe. And so there is no special treatment being given. The researchers are going about the episode in the exact same way that they do every other fight. So I believe him. So that means all we have to do in this case is give a rundown on the stats themselves. Though Mitsuru is... Well, first and foremost, let's go with a couple stats that they have fairly in common, actually. So both of them are fairly even in speed. Weiss has fought Emerald Sasrai, who has lightning dodging feat, and Emerald is basically fodder at this point in the show. So, and then Mitsuru has herself dodged several shots of lightning and such. That basically means that they both should be fairly even. Some of the percentage might be a little bit different, like one of them might be 10-15% faster, but it should be okay. So in this case, then, that's basically the only thing that they're remotely close in at all. The rest of it is fairly far apart. Weiss is decently strong. She has a couple decent capabilities for her ice attacks and such. For example, being able to freeze incredibly large machines and Grim in like building-sized blocks of ice. That's good. But not only is Mitsuru entirely immune to ice attacks, which itself is a bit of a no-limits fallacy, but we'll get to that kind of. In fact, Mitsuru has basically scaling to people who can casually destroy entire mountains, and then Nyx is basically someone who can drop the friggin' moon on people, and she can take attacks from him. Or her, I'm actually not entirely certain. Again, I've given this a glance over, but I'm not the most knowledgeable person about Persona. But a character is essentially capable of dropping the moon, and Mitsuru can survive that. So, even with... Normally, if someone is immune to something, they really aren't. It's just like, they're immune to it up to a certain point. For example, you wouldn't say someone like Natsu, who could eat fire, would be capable of fighting Phoenix from X-Men. Like I think Universal, but probably, but... like a cosmic scale fire attack. Like, you wouldn't argue that, because even though he can eat it, that's way stronger than anything he's ever shown an immunity to. So this is the same in that case, except the fact that, for the most part, nothing that Weiss can do can actually hurt Mitsuru. So in this case, it's not just immunity to ice, it's an immunity to Weiss. Which kind of brings us into the next major part of it, is experience, actually. Mitsuru's been fighting a lot longer over the course of her time with Seas and with the Shadow Operatives. She also got her start way, way earlier. When she was a child, she was already using like her persona to do things like defending her father. Meanwhile, Weiss is actually one of the least experienced combatants in the pretty much the entirety of RWBY outside of, like, Oscar Pine. So one of the things to keep in mind here is that Weiss, when she first got to Beacon, was crazy inexperienced in a fairly discreet way, actually. When she was in that first fight against the Beowulfs with Ruby, she was going over the steps for her stance and combat in her head. Now, what this tells us is that she had recited nothing to muscle memory yet. For the most part, if you are a very, very good combatant, you don't need to go over the step 1, step 2, step 3 in your head. It's muscle memory. You just do it. So in her doing that, it shows that at that point she was already very inexperienced. So, meanwhile, people like Ruby, Yang, they were far more experienced by that point because they just kind of acted instead of going through things deliberately. So then she had her time at Beacon being trained, which was, I think, over the course of a couple months. Probably about 6 or 7 months, which isn't very much time in all honesty, because right after the Vital Festival, that was when she went back to Atlas and she returned to having fuck all for training. The most you could argue for it was that she did train her summoning capabilities, but beyond that, not really. She mostly just kind of stuck around her room and went to those annoying parties and did her performances and things like that. It wasn't really conducive to her actually growing as a fighter. And meanwhile, other characters in the series were going off and destroying town-emptying legendary Grimm. So naturally she fell behind pretty hard there. And this also comes to the fact that she has one of the worst win rates out of any character in the series. She has never beaten a human character. She's gotten bodied extremely hard by people like Vernal. She got blindsided by Cinder, so I'm not sure that counts, but Flint. She lost to White Fang Commander. We don't really have a name for him. A lot of the fans call him Banesaw. She got bodied by him very hard. Her only wins have been against, like, a Borbatusk, the Wasp Grimm that she has, which she actually needed resources that she wouldn't otherwise have for that. She actually needed to basically, like, get rid of an entire, like, plane's cargo of dust in order to actually take the thing down, which wasn't even something that she would realistically have in her arsenal at that point. And then she beat the Knight, which was, I think the manga clarified a bit more with that it was a one of the Geist Grimm that had possessed a giant suit of armor. So, that's something. Those are her only wins. She only has 3 wins. Other than that, she gets basically the stuffing beat out of her every fight she's in. So, it really does put it into kind of the perspective of one of the characters has way higher stats, way more experience. The only thing that Weiss really has in this fight is versatility and mobility through being able to fly with the not only her glyphs as well, but also her Wasp Grimm. She is also capable of basically flying with that. I think they even had that in the preview for the fight, that she's already using the flight with the Grimm. So then, it's not really going to do anything. Having those 2 things as an advantage is basically tantamount to nothing. Especially when the opponent has mind-altering effects. One of them is something called Marin Karin. Apparently it's a big meme for Persona 3. I've been seeing it everywhere for a lot of this research time. It's a mind-altering effect that I believe gets the opponent to give you money or heal you or do something of the sort. Well, basically, there's only specific characters in RWBY who would actually be able to heal you. Weiss doesn't have money, ironically. I'm unsure if Weiss buffing her would kind of fall under a similar vein of that, because she does have the time dilation things that she used on Blake in the past, and I don't think ever again since. So potentially that could be something that she could do, is basically speeding up Mitsuru, which Yeah, Weiss has no counter to any mind-altering effects like that. So it really just stacks on what's going to be happening here, which is definitely that Mitsuru should win. And I really hope for Death Battle's sake that she does, because the internet will probably not take kindly to Weiss winning. And if anyone should lose a Death Battle, it's like the least combat-capable member of Team Ruby. So hopefully we come back to a good next time and a good this time. Alright, you guys have a great day.